Hey guys, what's going on? A while ago, one of you were commenting in the comment section that I should do a video clarifying the Charlottesville situation, kind of showing the way the media manipulated what Trump said and the reasons why Trump answers this question kind of contentiously the way that he does now. The most recent example of this, of course, is the first debate where Trump was debating Biden, and Chris Wallace brings up white nationalism again, and once again has Trump in the position where he needs to disavow white nationalists. For me, the answer was not shocking at all, because I know how Trump speaks. I know the tone and tenor of his voice. I know that he is sarcastic a lot of the times. One of the things I like to tell people is don't always take him literally, but always take him seriously. It's kind of the way to do it. But very, very rarely take him literally. He's a difficult personality to get the idea of, and so what a lot of people end up getting trapped in is they don't understand his speech patterns, and they take a lot of the things that he says quite literally. They don't give him any leeway in the fact that he does talk in a strange way. But there were other reasons why I'm sure he answered this question strangely in this example. We're going to go over some things that would probably have made me answer this question a bit contentiously if I had been in his position. So let's go through the video and we'll talk.
National Guard.
You have repeatedly criticized the vice president for not specifically calling out Antifa and other left-wing extremist groups. But are you willing tonight to condemn white supremacists and militia groups and to say that they need to stand down and not add?
So Chris Wallace just then said that they need to stand down. Because remember, the media made such a big deal about the fact that Trump said stand down and stand by. Chris Wallace had just asked Trump, will you tell them to stand down?
They need to stand down and not add to the violence in a number of these cities, as we saw in Kenosha and as we've seen in Portland.
Sure,
Are you
I'm
prepared
willing
to
do
specifically
that,
do it?
Sure, I'm willing to do that. That's twice now.
I would say almost everything I see is from the left wing.
And this is where Trump drives them insane, and this is why they hate him so much, because he refuses not to acknowledge the people who are causing damage and destruction on the other side.
The right wing.
So what are you saying?
I'm willing to do anything. I want to see peace.
Then do it, sir.
Say it.
I'm willing to do anything. So now we're at 3 points where he said that he will condemn white nationalism or white supremacy. Or tell them to stand down, I think is what Wallace says.
Well, then do it, sir.
Say it. Do it. Say it. Do you want to call him? What do you want to call him? Give me a...
And Trump does this all the time. He's like, you need to tell me who. Who am I supposed to condemn? Because he's already condemned like 35 different groups. And he needs to know which ones you want me to condemn. And everybody's like, oh, he doesn't want to answer. No, wait, I'll show you later. Yes, that is how he answers.
Give me a
white
name.
supremacists and
white supremacists
and right
Proud Boys. Stand back and stand by. But I'll tell you what. Somebody's got to do something about Antifa and the left, because this is not a...
And so there's typical Trump. It's a counterpunch. He says, give me a name, and Chris Wallace is just blubbering, and so Biden's like, the Proud Boys. And Trump says, Proud Boys, stand back and stand by.
Problem. This is a left wing. This is a left wing problem.
White supremacist. Antifa's an idea, not an organization.
Oh, you got to be
not
kidding.
militia. That's what his FBI director said.
Well, then you know what?
No, we're done, sir. We're moving on to the next.
When a bat hits you over the head, that's not an idea.
Everybody in your administration tells you the truth has a bad idea.
Can I tell you what?
You have no ideas.
Antifa is a dangerous radical
group. Gentlemen, we're now moving on to the Trump and Biden records.
They'll overthrow you.
When a president, I'm going to ask a question.
They'll overthrow you. Now, let's talk about why it is that Trump could have possibly been irritated at that question. We've talked many times about the similarities between 2016 and 2020, and I see them every day, everywhere I look. It's almost becoming a Mandela effect to me, but I don't always talk about all the ones I see. When this happened, this was another time where I was like, oh my God, it's 2016 on repeat. Because when Chris Wallace asked him that question, the first thing that came into my mind was he asked him that at a debate in 2016.
Also talked about your position on race and the controversy over your failure to denounce David Duke on Sunday. You have repeatedly...
His failure to denounce David Duke. Remember that.
...disavowed him since then, but I'd like to go deeper than that.
before Chris Wallace gets deeper than that, I'd like to just play you guys a quick clip. Even though this is the first time Chris Wallace is asking the white nationalist, will you disavow them question, Trump still has a reason to be irritated here, because unlike in 2020 and 2016, the thing that they were trying to get Trump on was, you didn't disavow David Duke fast enough. Notice, fast enough. He disavowed him, just not fast enough. Let me play you a little clip from 2000. It's actually on Valentine's Day in 2000. You see, in February of 2000, this is just before, of course, obviously 2001 that changed everything. Donald Trump has an interview with Matt Lauer on Valentine's Day. It's because Trump is a member of a party that was formed by Ross Perot called the Reform Party. It was basically launched off the back of Ross Perot's 1996 run for president. And Jesse Ventura, who was a member of that party, had swooned Trump trying to get him to run. Then some contentious stuff happened between Pat Buchanan and Jesse Ventura and a few other people, and Jesse Ventura ended up leaving the party. When Jesse Ventura left the party, David Duke joined the party. And so when that happened, it kind of all happened like wham, bam, bam. Trump was out. So he didn't run for president. He goes on to say some really interesting things in this interview, and I will put the complete interview in the show notes, which are always below the pinned comment. So you can go there and watch this whole interview. It's quite interesting. The reason why I'm playing it is because this is 2016. Chris Wallace is telling Trump he didn't disavow David Duke quick enough. But in 2000, when Trump was talking to Matt Lauer with all the background that I just gave you, this is why Trump was leaving the party.
I've made my decision. I'm not going to be running. The party is, as you know, self-destructing. Jesse has left, and that's a problem. And so I will not be running.
Not running for the nomination of the Reform Party, or not considering any run for the presidency this time around?
Not considering a run.
Nothing could change your mind with that?
No, totally not.
When you say the party is self-destructing, what do you see as the biggest problem with the Reform Party right now?
Well, you've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly...
Well, you've got David Duke just joined. He's a bigot, a racist, a problem. In the year 2000, 16 years before Chris Wallace asks him to disavow David Duke the 15th time, but in 2016.
Just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party.
So Trump, he doesn't need, in any kind of sane world, if this wasn't clown world, he would never need to disavow David Duke. They could do a cursory search on Trump and find out that he left the Reform Party because David Duke joined it. But let's let Chris Wallace finish asking Trump to disavow white supremacy in the first debate.
Are your views on the Ku Klux Klan and white supremacists?
I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. I've been doing it now for 2 weeks. You're probably about the 18th person that's asked me the question. It was very clear. That question was also talked about in the form of groups. I want to know, which groups are you talking about? You have to tell me which groups. Ultimately, he got to the Ku Klux Klan, which obviously I'm going to disavow. And by the way, if you look on my Twitter account, almost immediately after the program, they were disavowed again. You know.
So he says right here in 2016, and by the way, I wanted him to name the groups, because he says, will you disavow the groups? And he said, I want you to name the groups. So he ultimately could only name the Ku Klux Klan, and of course I'll disavow them. So in 2020, when he is asked the exact same question, he gives the exact same answer. Which groups? The group is named by Biden, the Proud Boys. Trump's like, fine, Proud Boys, stand back and stand by, or whatever the heck Chris Wallace just told me to tell them, which was to stand down. Just so you know, guys, I've got some of this a little bit sped up because I don't want you to have to sit here and watch all this in slow time. Trump sounds funny when he's a little bit sped up, but it's all good. I could understand why Trump was irritated when he was posed that question by that little weasel Chris Wallace. Wallace had asked him the same damn question in the debate in 2016. And don't you think, as the American people, that there were literally a billion other questions that he could have asked them that would have been more productive for us to learn in the debate? It's insane. So just in case you don't think that he had disavowed David Duke or the Ku Klux Klan enough, before we get into what went on in Charlottesville, just watch this a second.
We are a country that stands united in condemning hate and evil
in all of its very ugly forms. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. As I said on Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and other hate groups that are repugnant to everything we hold dear as Americans. And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. The vile, hate-filled poison of anti-Semitism must be condemned and confronted everywhere and anywhere it appears. There must be no tolerance for anti-Semitism in America or for any form of religious or racial hatred or prejudice. We must never ignore the vile poison of anti-Semitism or those who spread its venomous creed. With one voice, we must confront this hatred anywhere and everywhere it occurs.
It's hilarious to me that only Donald Trump could simultaneously be labeled a racist and a bigot and a xenophobe, and yet at the same time be one of the biggest friends to Israel and have a Jewish son-in-law and his daughter converted. For anybody who knows anything, that little plaque up there on the wall, that's the Tree of Life Award. So he could get all of this, and so this stuff gets some people, they start thinking, well, I can't trust Donald Trump because he's too close to Israel. Maybe he's not American enough. And this is the problem with those crazy folks. At the same time Trump gets that, he also, on the other side of it, is getting that he's a racist bigot. He's simultaneously both monsters. It's wild.
Our entire nation mourns the loss of life, prays for the wounded, and stands in solidarity with the Jewish community. We forcefully condemn the evil of anti-Semitism and hate, which must be defeated. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America. Hatred warps the mind, ravages the heart, and devours the soul.
Yeah, so you get the point. It's obvious he's disavowed these people, but that isn't really the point of this episode. Them harping on him shows that the media is running an op around this whole thing, which makes me want to look closer at Charlottesville itself. And when you look at Charlottesville, as with most things, you start digging at it a little bit, and it stinks. Let's go over a couple of articles about Charlottesville, get the highlights, and then after we've done that, we'll go to the actual press conference where he supposedly said that neo-Nazis were very fine people. So this is written on August 7th, 2017. Charlottesville says permit for Unite the Right will be approved only if rally is moved to McIntyre Park. This did not happen, but it's interesting to go through this article to see maybe possibly reasons why the police failed so bad. Because when we go over Charlottesville, what we're going to find out is that every turn the police failed. They performed poorly. First of all, this is Jason Kessler. He's the guy who first filed the permit for the Unite the Right demonstration that he wanted to have in Lee Park to protest the taking down of Robert E. Lee's statue, been renamed Emancipation Park. Citing concerns for security and safety, Charlottesville officials on Monday said they will approve a demonstration permit for Saturday's Unite the Right rally organized by pro-white activists if the rally is moved to McIntyre Park. But Jason Kessler, who is organizing the rally, says he won't accept the condition because McIntyre Park lacks the symbolism provided by the statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee that has stood in Emancipation Park, recently renamed from Lee Park since 1920s. The whole thing is in support of the Lee Monument, Kessler said after the city's news conference announcing the decision to change the location. The fact that they try and move it away from the statue is, in itself, a violation of our free speech rights. Kessler said he will seek legal recourse rather than move the rally. At the news conference, city manager Maurice Jones said the size and nature of the demonstration for which Kessler submitted a permit application on May 30 has changed as more protesters and counter-protesters signed on. Based on information provided to me by law enforcement officials, the city has decided to approve Mr. Kessler's application for a permit to hold a demonstration on the day and at the times requested, provided that he use McIntyre Park rather than Emancipation Park for the demonstration, Jones said, reading from a prepared statement. So I would love to know, what was the information that law enforcement officials gave to them? Well, he went to the ACLU and he made sure that it was held in Emancipation Park. The police knew something that made them want to take it to a larger, more spread out, as an Antifa person is about to refer to it, as a larger, more spread out battlefield. Jones and other city officials declined to answer any questions during or after the news conference. The rally in Emancipation Park promised multiple planned protests and possibly thousands of protesters vehemently opposed to each other, all crammed into a 4-block area of downtown. That had city officials worried about public safety. According to permits acquired from the city of University of Virginia Professor Walt Hynek, counter-protesters are expected to gather at the park and at nearby McGuffrey Park and Justice Park, recently named from Jackson Park. Officials on Monday declined to estimate the number of protesters they expect, but estimates bandied about by local businesses and organizers range from 2,000 to 8,000. Police said the anticipated number of protesters would make it difficult to ensure public safety if the Unite the Right rally were held at Emancipation Park. That turned out to be correct. Having the demonstration at McIntyre Park is safer because the park is large enough to accommodate the size of the anticipated crowd, said Charlottesville Police Chief Al Thomas. It also avoids a situation whereby overflow crowds spill into the streets, as would likely occur at Emancipation Park. A bold prediction that came true, unfortunately. Thomas, who also read from a prepared statement, said the larger park will allow more security, better emergency medical care, and other services. Law enforcement also will have the room needed to maneuver and direct crowds towards safety in case of a disturbance. He said, additionally, we can more effectively stage other public safety resources that would allow for immediate response if needed. Social activists said they question the safety of relocating to McIntyre Park because it has limited entrances and exits should something happen. One referred to the park on Twitter as a potential battlefield. McIntyre Park has limited egress and ingress and has natural choke points, said Emily Gorsinski, and a Charlottesville social activist who questioned whether the relocation would provide more safety. If you're out in the heat at McIntyre, forget it. There's no shade. So the police knew, because there had been permits. That's one thing that Trump definitely got wrong about both sides not having permits. Everybody had these permits to protest and to counter-protest. Right now, we'll just have the talk about freedom of speech. So, a guy way smarter than me once told me that freedom of speech doesn't mean anything until somebody is standing in front of you saying the most vile thing that you disagree with, but you're able to recognize their freedom to say that because they're not preaching violence on another person, they're not hurting anyone with their speech. That is when your morals are truly tested. Do you believe in free speech or not? You only believe in free speech until your feelings get hurt, and then you don't believe in free speech? Because if that's the case, then you don't. There's either free speech or not free speech. And this is the problem with Antifa. The idea that you can stop violence with violence. It's not true. It's a lie. It's a lie that the very people they're trying to, quote, bring down, the corporatists who have been bringing the hell of war onto our country for hundreds of years. It's a lie that they tell us, that we can solve things with violence. You can't kill an idea. You don't have to punch a Nazi if you beat fascism on the battlefield of ideas. If your ideas are better, you don't have to worry about it. This idea that you need to go punch a Nazi and then you get to determine what the heck a Nazi is quite bizarre. And there's this thing that people can't do in their mind anymore, where they can't simultaneously disagree with something yet support somebody's right to do it. And it's not just one side or the other. Somebody kneels during the flag and there's a whole different group of people that lose their ever-loving minds. But they're not doing anything violent. They're not causing any harm to any other person. Is that not free speech? I understand it hurts your feelings. I understand you disagree with it with the core of your being. But that's when free speech matters. That's when it matters. That's what we have to let happen. We either have it or we don't. So in that context, when I'm talking about one side or the other here, I want you to know everybody who's there has the right to be there if they're being peaceful. There were people there early on both sides. People there holding up signs that were saying, hey, we don't want this statue brought down. We feel like you're destroying history. And just so you know, in that crowd, there could be people there who don't like Robert E. Lee, but they think the statue should remain because it's a part of our history. And maybe every time we walk past it, we are supposed to feel ashamed. Maybe it is there to put a little bit of shame on our shoulders every time we walk by it. A little reminder, a little kick in the ass. But no, people just want to rip it down and take it away and make it like it never happened. And you know what that does? That means for sure it will happen again in a few decades. But anyways, at the beginning of this thing, you had people there who just didn't want the statues coming down. And you had people there who didn't agree with those people. And that was cool. All hell broke loose. Now, it's even when you go to, so fact-checking websites don't matter. You can't find any corporate media that is not just through the roof biased about Charlottesville. But there is one place that I found where I'm comfortable about going through some of the facts about Charlottesville in hindsight, and they do a pretty darn good job of just let's looking at some of the facts. The riot at Charlottesville Unite the Right event is trivial by historical standards, but it is rich with insights into modern America. This street fighting, like that of the Weimar Republic, might be a milestone on America's path to an ugly future. Quote, cable news replayed a seemingly endless loop of the early violence at Emancipation Park, which police in riot gear had surrounded the protesters on three sides, although they seemed to watch as groups beat each other with sticks and bludgeoned one another with shields. Many on both sides came dressed for battle with helmets and chemical irritants. At one point, police appeared to retreat and then watched the beatings before eventually moving in to end the free-for-all, make arrests, and tend to the injured. Governor Terry McAuliffe declared a state of emergency about 11 a.m. and activated the Virginia National Guard. You have Governor Terry McAuliffe and his National Guard and his state police. They're all there, and they're in tons of riot gear. And then as you go through these events, what you find is there's a pattern that the police aren't separating these rioters, these protesters. Standing nearby, an assortment of Virginia State Police troopers and Charlottesville police wearing protective gear watched silently from behind an array of metal barricades and did nothing. It was a scene that played out over and over in Charlottesville as law enforcement confronted the largest public gathering of white supremacists in decades. We walked the streets beginning in the early morning hours and repeatedly witnessed instances in which authorities took a largely laissez-faire approach, allowing white supremacists and counter-protests to physically battle. By 11 a.m., what had started hours earlier with some shoving and a few punches had evolved into a series of wild melees as people attacked one another with fists, feet, and improvised weapons they'd brought with them to the park. White supremacists and anti-racists began blasting each other with this thick orange streams of pepper spray. The police did little to stop the bloodshed. Several times, a group of assault rifle-toting militia members from New York State wearing body armor and desert camo played a more active role in breaking up fights. Shortly before noon, authorities shut down the rally and the related demonstrations and marched the white supremacists out of the park into the streets. While a fact-rich report, it's propaganda, not mentioning that both sides came prepared for violence and rioted enthusiastically. It was written in terms of white hat leftists and evil fascists. The news media's coverage was so one-sided that some journalists broke ranks and called their peers out on it. David Cooper, 70, of Staunton, Virginia, spoke to the AP after a Sunday morning brawl at a park that went unchecked by police. He said that people got hurt and the police stood by and didn't do a god-dang thing. The hard left seemed as hate-filled as the alt-right. I saw club-wielding Antifa beating white nationalists being led out of the park. The other big story of the riot is that, like the Berkeley riot, police were largely well-paid and heavily armed observers. Brittany Kane Conley, a minister in training at Sojourners United Church of Christ, arrived in downtown Charlottesville on Saturday morning expecting that there might be violence. She did not expect things to get out of hand so quickly. There was no police presence, Miss Kane Conley said. We were watching people punch each other. People were bleeding. All the while, police were inside of barricades at the park, watching. It was essentially just brawling on the street and community members trying to protect each other. Even after the riot, police were derelict in their responsibility to maintain order. Police were not at a potentially explosive event in town hall, but they show up afterwards. And this is the guy that I just showed you that started this Unite the Right. Many accounts mention a right-wing militia, a new and disturbing addition to this new phase of American politics. Perhaps the most amazing chapter of the riot was how the government officials responded to it afterwards. They sound like characters from Alice in Wonderland. In the weeks leading up to the protests, city and state officials put together a detailed plan for the rally, mobilizing 1,000 first responders, including 300 state troopers and members of the National Guard. Judging from how events unfolded today, it appears that the strategy was to avoid direct confrontations with protesters. Yeah, that was their strategy. Avoid confrontations with protesters. 1,000 first responders, that's a lot. Where were they? Estimates of the crowd size vary widely, but most are several thousand. Police says we will not intervene until given command to do so. The government explains their inaction. There was a ton of preparation that went into one goal for government, which was setting the conditions so that people could express themselves and assemble peaceably. And what happened was you had a lot of people who were not willing to accept even their basic condition of what we do in our democracy. After a major screw-up, saying nothing is often the best policy. Local and state authorities declined to address specific questions about how the demonstration was handled or their strategy for the day. The city's mayor, police chief, city manager, and McAuliffe also did not answer questions at an early evening news conference. Al Thomas, the police chief, said only that the city will be reviewing events of the day over the coming weeks and months. So they're giving Trump crap because they say he didn't make an announcement about Charlottesville fast enough, and yet none of the state and local government that were actually responsible for screwing this up through complete ineptitude or why are they rioting in Portland? Why? Because they're allowed, or it was allowed. Maybe they were allowed to riot. Maybe Charlottesville was something that some people wanted to happen. When in doubt, obfuscate. Charlottesville Vice Mayor Wes Bellamy defended the police tactics. I'm not in the business of throwing our police department under the bus because they're doing the best job that they can, said Bellamy. I don't think police officers were just twiddling their thumbs. And this is absolute bullcrap because we know for a fact they hate the police. The chief of police sets up his own personal goalposts. Charlottesville Police Chief Al Thomas said at least 35 people had been injured, many of them from violent encounters between white supremacists and counter-protesters. He said nobody had been wounded due to confrontations between police and the public. Well, of course, you guys didn't do anything. Who are you going to believe, the state police spokeswoman or your eyes? Corinne Geller, a spokeswoman for the state police, said, it may have looked a lot like our folks were standing around because of the sheer number of officers on the scene. But there were other troopers and law enforcement officers who were responding to the incidents as they arose. Lieutenant Joseph Hatter, a commander with the Charlottesville Police, said officers tried to create separate areas for protesters and counter-protesters to reduce the violence, but he conceded, it didn't really work, did it? I think there was a plan to have them separated. They didn't want to be separated. About the apparent delay in reaction to the violence, Hatter said, I don't know that we did wait. I think we did the best we could under the circumstances. He declined to elaborate. Brian Moran, Virginia's Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security, was watching the events from a command post on the 6th floor of a Wells Fargo bank on the downtown mall. There were sporadic fights. I compare it to hockey, he said. Often in hockey there are sporadic fights, and then they separate. Asked why the police did not do more to control the brawling, Mr. Moran said, it was a volatile situation, and it's unfortunate people resorted to violence, but from our plan, to ensure the safety of our citizens and our property, it went extremely well. So let's just stop right there because I want to paint a picture for you. You have this guy, Brian Moran. He's the state of Virginia, already heavy with the bureaucracy. It's where the bureaucracy lives outside D.C. Virginia's Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. So now we're talking the most disgusting of bureaucrats. His position most likely means nothing, and he most likely doesn't do much of anything. Most likely senior executive service. Truly part of the swamp. So you have this evil little swamp creature, and he's on the top floor of the Wells Fargo Center in Charlottesville, sipping Mai Tais or whatever it is he's doing with his buddies up there. And they are in this building looking down on Emancipation Park as Americans eat each other alive. And he is so unaware of his elitist bullshit that when the New York Times interviews him about it, he says it was like watching a hockey game. How very telling, how very revealing. And of course, no one from the New York Times is going to ask him, well, hey, Junior, who was up there with you? Why were you guys up there watching it? What exactly was the command center doing? Who was in the command center? What plans did you guys have? You said your plans went off without a hitch, but there were tons of people injured and Americans fighting each other. What plan did you have? No, nobody's going to ask those questions. The police chief of Charlottesville, Virginia, denied Monday that cops were ordered not to intervene or make arrests during the violent clashes that led to the death of an anti-racist protester. Chief Al Thomas said it was simply not true that cops had been told to stand down Saturday. Then he abruptly ended a televised news conference. This guy's just like, when you ask him a tough question, he's just like, no, and then leaves. Thomas said uniformed cops had to change into protective gear before clearing the park, which sparked disturbances throughout the downtown area that weren't quelled for about an hour. Asked if he regretted not having his cops in riot gear before the planned rally, Thomas didn't answer the question directly and only spoke about the 3 people who had died. I was about to say he walked off. Things were getting out of hand in the skirmishes between the alt-right and what I would describe as the outside agitators who wanted to encourage violence. The alt-right and the outside agitators. Interesting. Asked why police did not intervene sooner, Toscano said he could not comment. He said they trained hard to prepare for the demonstration, and it might have been that they were waiting for a more effective time to get people out of the park. About that armed militia. Under pressure from an angry public, the governor resorted to some myth-making, which went viral. At a press conference this evening, Virginia officials declined to answer questions about the police response, but said they were not taken surprised by the violence or the number of protesters. This could have been a much worse day, said Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. We planned for a long time for today's incidents. Governor McAuliffe also defended the police response, saying, it's easy to criticize, but I can tell you this, 80% of the people here had semi-automatic weapons. 80% of the people there? You saw the militia walking down the street. You would have thought they were an army, he added. I was just talking to the state police upstairs. They said better equipment than our state police had, he said, referring to the militia members. And see, this is, you got a Democrat governor again, and he's encouraging riots, and he's lying on national TV about these militias that are better armed than his own state army. And the man says that 80% of the people there were armed with semi-automatic weapons. 80%. Videos of the event show few people with guns. How many militia were there at Charlottesville? A few dozen versus the few fat 1,000 first responders and the 300 state police and National Guard? And what was the protesters' better equipment? In August of 2014, the Virginia Pilot, Virginia's largest newspaper, reported on the large quantities of military equipment stockpiled by Virginia police. Here's a photo of an armed vehicle on patrol in Charlottesville during the riot. Heather Fluitt, Deputy Communications Director for the Governor's Office, told PolitiFact, the governor was referencing the weapons and tactical gear the members of various groups attending the rally had on their persons. I can assure you that the Virginia State Police personnel were equipped with more than adequate specialized tactical and protective gear for the purpose of fulfilling their duties to serve and protect those in attendance of the August 12th event in Charlottesville. Corrine Geller, Virginia State Police Public Relations Manager, said much of the same to the Washington Free Beacon. The governor also claimed there were weapons stashed around the cities. Geller said the police conducted searches before the protests. No weapons were located as the result of those searches. I found few details about the numbers and actions of the militia at the riot, except for this in The Guardian. The men in charge of the 32 militia members who came to Charlottesville from 6 states to form a unit with the mission for defending free speech were Christian Yingling, the commanding officer of the Pennsylvania Lightfoot Militia. We spoke to the Charlottesville Police Department beforehand and offered to come down there and help with security, Yingling told The Guardian. They said, we cannot invite you in any official capacity, but you are welcome to attend, and they gave us an escort into the event, he added. Yingling said that he had been asked to bring a team came to Charlottesville by local militia, the Virginia Minutemen Militia, to reinforce their numbers and to be in charge on the day. But Yingling said the original request for a militia force to attend the event had come from the organizers of the white nationalist rally, who wanted them to act as their security. The militiamen had said, "No, we will not come just to defend you," Yingling recalled. "It's important for us to say we are there in a neutral stance." America's long experience with riots. Police have developed effective techniques to maintain order. Too bad the Charlottesville police did not use them. The whole point is to have overwhelming force so that people don't get the idea that they can do the kinds of things and get away with it, says Charles Ramsey, the head of both the district and Philadelphia police departments. Demonstrators and counter-demonstrators need to be in sight and sound of each other, but somebody has to be between them, he said. That's usually the police, and in Charlottesville, that was what they did not do. They put nobody between the protesters and the counter-protesters. They were separated by mere inches in each other's face, spitting at each other, throwing bottles. They were allowed to do this. This whole entire situation was created, and then throughout the entire situation, somebody was fanning the flames, and it was not Donald Trump. And then the writer of this article goes on to talk about how each group viewed the Charlottesville incident from their perspective, from both the left and the right. And like I said, I'll include this down in the pinned comments so that you can read it yourself. So that's all I'm going to do on Charlottesville itself, but I wanted you guys to have a good grasp of the way that I see the situation. I see a police department that allowed this entire thing to happen, and not only that, but did things like not separate the two sides from each other, pack them all into the small park, surround the entire grouping on only 3 sides. Remember that, because that only allows for one exit point. Also, instead of discouraging armed militia members from coming down to the riot, if you talk to the armed militia members, of which there were only about 30 or less, not hundreds like the governor lied about, then you find out that the police not only encouraged them, but gave them an escort to the event. Doesn't that sound strange? A police department encouraging armed militia members to come on down. It fits nice and easy, though, with the Homeland Security guy and his whole control center stationed on the 6th floor of the Wells Fargo Center, where they all sat up there and watched a bird's eye view as they created chaos in the streets of Charlottesville. Something that they consider a smashing success for the media nonsense that was created during and after it, and for the fact that none of their local businesses were hurt, only folks protesting. And they tell you, right to your face, it was a success as far as our plan was. Yeah, it was. And you know, I'm not going to use the FF term here but let me just say, this event, there were people involved in this event that set this event up to where it was going to happen like this. And like so many media events that I've seen in my lifetime, it's that way. So that's our talk on Charlottesville. Before we get off of Charlottesville and get on to what Donald Trump said about it, I want to show you just a few minutes clips. This is Lou Gradowski from We Are Change. If you don't follow We Are Change on YouTube, follow it. He's one of my favorite reporters who goes down and gets inside the riots, and he actually knows what he's doing and knows how to stay safe. But he made a video. It's one of the more famous ones from Charlottesville because it has the Nazi male punching the Antifa female that kind of went viral. But I want you to watch this video if I'm going to show you any video from on the ground on what it was like in Charlottesville, because it gives you a pretty good feeling of how it was just a bunch of idiots that had been let loose and allowed to run their reign of terror through Charlottesville. So they're holding the line against Antifa. Antifa has set this smoke bomb off. There's no police anywhere. No police. Street gangs. that guy yelling kill, he's somebody who is one of the lieutenants or somebody. And kill means stop the attack because for whatever reason, there might be a bunch of other counter-protesters or protesters coming in that direction. It could be the cops have shown up, but for whatever reason, he knows they're supposed to know when he yells kill to jump up off that guy. That girl got yacked. Okay, now this line of guys is pushing forward, trying to push Antifa back from the park.
Again, you're watching it live.
Do you guys see what I'm saying? This is like Gangs of New York. They let a group of ruffians, black bloc on one side, and I'm sorry, but if you look at this side over here, they've got American flag capes and Trump capes. I mean, these are fools. They're fools. This is what happens when you let fools run amok. But the point of this matter in Charlottesville, the question that never got asked because it all became about Trump is, why were these people allowed to run amok like this? Lou's laughing.
These people are kicking out Antifa. They just stormed them. Oh, shit.
So you heard him. He said these people are kicking out Antifa. They're just now storming them. And there you can see, guys, right here off to the left, these are some black bloc guys that are getting beat finally. And if you look down the road there, you can see a lot of people are in black bloc. Now, these aren't white supremacists that are chasing these Antifa types. These are just ruffians that came out to the street because they saw violence and are fighting back.
Protest fireworks. There's not police flashbangs. There's the explosive that Antifa has.
And they're spraying pepper spray, chemical spray at these protesters. The Antifa is. The same ones who complain about getting spray used on them by the cops. They're using it on these guys.
A lot of pepper spray has been sprayed.
Wow. That was intense. Again, this is real. Live independent media. We are change.org. Fuck yeah!
That one went off right by him.
Fucking pussies! Fucking pussies!
All right, slow down a little bit. Slow down. We don't have the numbers. Again, subscribe to youtube.com/wearechange. Live, independent, unbiased media. All right, hold on. Stay back. Stay back. Stay back. Everyone else stay.
Not a cop for miles.
Again, if you guys want more independent media coverage that's not afraid to get on the front lines, support us on patreon.com/wearechange. This is real independent media.
What's up, we are Change. How we doing? doing? Last Revolution Media, Graham Bed saying, what's up, man? Good stuff. Hey, watch out, watch out. To the right, to the right. To the right.
So that's what it's like on the street there. That's what these protests were like. There were no police doing anything. This was all insanity. It was a bunch of crazies run amok, and clearly on both sides. So in this context, let's look at this god-awful, horrible thing that Donald Trump said in response to these riots. First, he responded to them that night in a press conference that he didn't take questions at.
As you know, this was a small press conference, but a very important one, and it was scheduled to talk about the great things that we're doing with the Secretary on the Veterans Administration, and we will talk about that very much so in a little while, but I thought I should put out a comment as to what's going on in Charlottesville. So, again, I want to thank everybody for being here. In particular, I want to thank our incredible veterans, and thank you, fellas. But we're closely following the terrible events unfolding in Charlottesville, Virginia. We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides.
We condemn in the strongest terms hatred, bigotry, and violence on all sides.
It's been going on for a long time in our country. Not Donald Trump, not Barack Obama. It's been going on for a long, long time. It has no place in America. What is vital now is a swift restoration of law and order and the protection of innocent lives. No citizen should ever fear for their safety and security in our society, and no child should ever be afraid to go outside and play.
What a horrible thing to say in response to the Charlottesville riots. Oh my God, what a bigot.
Parents, and have a good time. I just got off the phone with the governor of Virginia, Terry McAuliffe, and we agreed that the hate and the division must stop, and must stop right now. We have to come together as Americans with love for our nation and true affection, really, and I say this so strongly, true affection for each other. Our country is doing very well in so many ways. We have record, just absolute record employment. We have unemployment, the lowest it's been in almost 17 years. We have companies pouring into our country, Foxconn and car companies and so many others. They're coming back to our country. We're renegotiating trade deals to make them great for our country and great for the American worker. We have so many incredible things happening in our country. So when I watch Charlottesville, to me it's very, very sad. I want to salute the great work of the state and local police in Virginia. Incredible.
Who did absolutely nothing and stood by and watched. And it really makes you wonder how much Trump knew at that time period. Because, I'm sorry, I'll just go out and say it. As I see it, the whole thing seems like an op to me. The state police did nothing.
Law enforcement, incredible people. And also the National Guard. They've really been working smart and working hard. They've been doing a terrific job. Federal authorities are also providing tremendous support to the governor. He thanked me for that. And we are here to provide whatever other assistance is needed. We are ready, willing, and able. Above all else, we must remember this truth. No matter our color, creed, religion, or political party, we are all Americans first.
No matter what our color, creed, or political party, we are all Americans first. Why did that become such a despised idea?
We love our country. We love our God. We love our flag. We're proud of our country. We're proud of who we are. So we want to get the situation straightened out in Charlottesville, and we want to study it. And we want to see what we're doing wrong as a country where things like this can happen. My administration is restoring the sacred bonds of loyalty between this nation and its citizens. But our citizens must also restore the bonds of trust and loyalty between one another. We must love each other, respect each other, and cherish our history and our future together. So important. We have to respect each other. Ideally, we have to love each other.
And so that was his initial response. And things continued to spiral in Charlottesville. And the media had clearly seen that it was their opportunity to take a situation that had happened in this country and spin it against the president. The next day, he was having a meeting about infrastructure with, I think, Transportation Secretary Chow, Steve Mnuchin, and I don't know that guy over there. So at this point, he was at Trump Towers. Remember, Admiral Rogers had to come tell him that the government was illegally spying on him through 702 about queries in the FISA court. So that was where that went down. But Trump was wanting to make a speech about his infrastructure plan and about how he had cut regulations to get roads built. And he said this was the flow chart that it would take people to get a road built typically, and it could last decades. And he said they got it down to that. And he said he was going to start getting things created infrastructure-wise very soon. But this isn't what the media wanted to talk about. The media wanted to talk about Charlottesville. They wanted a gotcha moment.
Because they're not taking their job seriously as it pertains to this country.
Oh, this is interesting. They ask him, why are corporations leaving your manufacturing council at the beginning of this? This was many years ago, before the CV hit, and it's interesting what he says. He says Merck's leaving because they make all of their ingredients in China and overseas, and he says they need to leave because I'm trying to tell them they need to make their ingredients here in the United States. Isn't that strange how that turned out to be right?
Because they're not taking their job seriously as it pertains to this country. We want jobs, manufacturing in this country. If you look at some of those people that you're talking about, they're outside of the country. They're having a lot of their product made outside. If you look at Merck as an example, take a look where, take a look at where their product is made. It's made outside of our country. We want products made in the country. Now, I have to tell you, some of the folks that will leave, they're leaving out of embarrassment because they make their products outside. And I've been lecturing them, including the gentleman that you're referring to, about you have to bring it back to this country. You can't do it necessarily in Ireland and all of these other places. You have to bring this work back to this country. That's what I want. I want manufacturing to be back into the United States so that American workers can benefit.
Why did you wait so long?
I didn't wait long. I didn't wait long. I didn't wait long. I wanted to make sure, unlike most politicians, that what I said was correct, not make a quick statement. The statement I made on Saturday, the first statement, was a fine statement. But you don't make statements that direct unless you know the fact. It takes a little while to get the facts. You still don't know the facts. And it's a very, very important process to me. And it's a very important statement. So I don't want to go quickly and just make a statement for the sake of making a political statement. I want to know the facts. If you go back to in fact, I brought it. As I said on, remember this, Saturday, we condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. And then I went on from there. Now, here's the thing. Excuse me. Take it nice and easy. Here's the thing. When I make a statement, I like to be correct. I want the facts. This event just happened. In fact, a lot of the event didn't even happen yet as we were speaking. This event just happened. Before I make a statement, I need the facts. So I don't want to rush into a statement. So making the statement when I made it was excellent. In fact, the young woman, who I hear is a fantastic young woman, and it was on NBC, her mother wrote me and said, through, I guess, Twitter, social media, the nicest things, and I very much appreciated that. I hear she was a fine, really actually an incredible young woman, but her mother on Twitter thanked me for what I said. And honestly, if the press were not fake, and if it was honest, the press would have said what I said was very nice. But unlike you and unlike the media, before I make a statement, I like to know the facts. They don't. They don't. They don't.
Here's Andrew England in your
How about a couple of
How
about a couple
was
of
it terrorism,
infrastructure
that
questions?
event? Was that terrorism?
Say it. What?
CEO of Walmart said you missed a critical opportunity to help bring the country together. Did you?
Not at all. I think the country. Look, you take a look. I've created over 1 million jobs since I'm president. The country is booming. The stock market is setting records. We have the highest employment numbers we've ever had in the history of our country. We're doing record business. We have the highest levels of enthusiasm. So the head of Walmart, who I know, who's a very nice guy, was making a political statement. I mean, ask him how he's doing. I do it the same way. And you know why? Because I want to make sure, when I make a statement, that the statement is correct. And there was no way of making a correct statement that early. I had to see the facts, unlike a lot of reporters. I didn't know David Duke was there. I wanted to see the facts. And the facts, as they started coming out,
David Duke again.
were very well stated. In fact, everybody said his statement was beautiful. If he would have made it sooner, that would have been good. I couldn't have made it sooner because I didn't know all of the facts. Frankly, people still don't know all of the facts. It was very important, excuse me. It was very important to me to get the facts out and correctly. Because if I would have made a fast statement, and the first statement was made without knowing much other than what we were seeing. The second statement was made after with knowledge, with great knowledge. There's still things that people don't know. I want to make a statement with knowledge. I wanted to know the facts. Okay.
Was this two questions. Was this terrorism? And can you tell us how you're feeling about your chief strategist?
Well, I think the driver of the car is a disgrace to himself, his family, and this country. And that is, you can call it terrorism. You can call it murder. You can call it whatever you want. I would just call it as the fastest one to come up with a good verdict. That's what I'd call it. Because there is a question. Is it murder? Is it terrorism? And then you get into legal semantics. The driver of the car is a murderer. And what he did was a horrible, horrible, inexcusable thing.
Can you tell us how you're feeling about your chief strategist, Mr.
Isn't that just such a horrible response? It's so racist and bigoted.
Can you talk about that?
I would echo Maggie's question. Steve Bannon is...
I never spoke to Mr. Bannon about it.
Tell us broadly what do you still have confidence
Well,
in
we'll
Steve?
see. And look, I like Mr. Bannon. He's a friend of mine. But Mr. Bannon came on very late. You know that. I went through 17 senators, governors, and I won all the primaries. Mr. Bannon came on very much later than that. And I like him. He's a good man. He is not a racist, I can tell you that. He's a good person. He actually gets a very unfair press in that regard. But we'll see what happens with Mr. Bannon. But he's a good person, and I think the press treats him, frankly, very unfairly.
Do you have confidence that Senator McCain has called on you to defend your National Security Advisor, H.R. McMaster, against
I've
some of
already
these
done it.
attacks?
I did it the last time.
And he called on it again, linking the
Senator
to
McCain?
the alt-right. And
Senator
saying
McCain, you mean the one who voted against Obamacare?
And he said
Who
that...
is Senator? You mean Senator McCain who voted against us getting good health care?
McCain said that the alt-right is behind these attacks, and he linked that same group.
The alt-right is behind these attacks. Isn't it funny to see Senator McCain causing all this drama? And when we look back on it, is it not so obvious what side Senator McCain was on? The same side Obama is on, the same side Clinton is on, and Romney is on, and Bush is on, the side that has Schumer on it, and Pelosi, and McConnell. You know, that side.
Those who perpetrated the attack in Charlottesville.
Well, I don't know. I can't tell you. I'm sure Senator McCain must know what he's talking about. But when you say the alt-right, define alt-right to me. You define it. Go ahead.
Well, I'm saying,
define it for me. Come on, let's go. Define
Senator
it for me.
McCain defined them as the same group.
Okay, what about the alt-left that came charging at him? Excuse me. What about the alt-left that came charging at the, as you say, the alt-right? Do they have any semblance of guilt?
This is Senator McCain.
Let me ask you this. What about the fact that they came charging with clubs in their hands, swinging clubs? Do they have any problem? I think they do. So, as far as I'm concerned, that was a horrible, horrible day. Wait a minute. I'm not finished. Fake news. That was a horrible day. I will tell you something. I watched those very closely, much more.
And so here's the okey doke that they're trying to pull on Trump. They're trying to say, Are you equating people who went down there to voice their disapproval of Nazis with Nazis? It sounds horrible, doesn't it? But when you see the footage down there, and it's obvious Trump keeps telling them, you haven't seen all the footage. Most people don't know everything that's happened. Even we don't know everything that's happened yet. But I've seen enough to know that both sides were doing wrong. And at the beginning of this, neither side was doing wrong. What they want to take his neutral position on this as, he wants to be able to say, whoever was violent was wrong. Whoever was peaceful was fine. And they want to turn it into a Trump loves Nazis.
Then you people watched it. And you have you had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent.
You had a group on one side that was bad and a group on the other side that was also violent.
Nobody wants to say that, but I'll say it right now.
And that's the thing. Nobody wants to say Antifa's violent, but I'll say it right now. And that's the key to this entire thing with Charlottesville. And that's what nobody talks about. But it was the first time a politician really came out hard and hit on Antifa and said, you know what? The left is violent too. We all knew the left was violent too. We all had seen those riots. We had seen things before Trump even got elected. We all knew what Black Bloc was. We didn't know there was a name for it, but we saw the people dressed in it. We knew this, but we didn't want to say it. Nobody wanted to say it out loud. Trump said it. He said the people who were being violent, who were out to punch a Nazi, are wrong.
You had a group on the other side that came charging in without a permit, and they were very, very violent. Go ahead.
Do you think that what you call the alt-left is the same?
He's wrong that everybody there had permits, okay?
Those people, all of those people, excuse me, I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups, but not all of those people were neo-Nazis.
Trust and believe you guys, the people who were there who are not neo-Nazis, the people who were there just trying to protest the statue coming down, and the people who left early because things went insane, I can promise you they appreciate their president saying, listen, not everybody who was there was an evil Nazi.
Not all of those people were white supremacists by any stretch. Those people were also there because they wanted to protest the taking down of a statue, Robert E. Lee. So, excuse me. And you take a look at some of the groups and you see, and you know it if you were honest reporters, which in many cases you're not, but many of those people were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. So, this week it's Robert E. Lee. I noticed that Stonewall Jackson's coming down. I wonder, is it George Washington next week? And is it Thomas Jefferson the week after? You know,
When he said this, people made fun of him. And they are now taking down statues of Abraham Lincoln, statues of Thomas Jefferson. This is, he called this a year before they started really going nuts and ripping down statues of Abraham Lincoln.
You have to ask yourself, where does it stop? But they were there to protest, excuse me, you take a look the night before, they were there to protest the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. Infrastructure question, go ahead. Should statues of Robert E. Lee stay up? I would say that's up to a local town, community, or the federal government, depending on where it is located.
Are you against the Confederacy? Race relations in America, and do you think things have gotten worse or better since you took office?
I think they've gotten...
That lady just asked him if he's against the Confederacy.
Better or the same? Look, they've been frayed for a long time, and you can ask President Obama about that because he'd make speeches about it. But I believe that the fact that I brought in, it will be soon, millions of jobs. You see where companies are moving back into our country. I think that's going to have a tremendous positive impact on race relations. We have companies coming back into our country. We have 2 car companies that just announced. We have Foxconn in Wisconsin just announced. We have many companies, I say the country. I think that's going to have a huge positive impact on race relations. You know why? It's jobs. What people want now, they want jobs. They want great jobs with good pay. And when they have that, you watch how race relations will be. And I'll tell you, we're spending a lot of money on the inner cities. We're fixing the inner cities. We're doing far more than anybody's done with respect to the inner cities. It's a priority for me. and it's very important.
Mr. President, are you putting what you're calling the alt-left and white supremacists on the same moral plane?
I'm not putting anybody on a moral plane. What I'm saying is this. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious, and it was horrible, and it was a horrible thing to watch. But there is...
Now, isn't that what you would have described from the video I just showed you?
Side. There was a group on this side, you can call them the left, or you've just called them the left, that came violently attacking the other group. So you can say what you want, but that's the way it is.
It's on both sides, sir. You said there was hatred, there was violence on both sides.
Well, I do think there's blame, yes. I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides, and I have no doubt about it, and you don't have any doubt about it either. And if you reported it accurately, you would say.
Neo-Nazis started this. They showed up in Charlottesville. They showed up in Charlottesville to protest.
Excuse me. They didn't put themselves down as neo, and you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group. Excuse me. I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Robert E. Lee are not the same.
Well, no, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? Are we going to take down, are we going to take down statues to George Washington? How about Thomas Jefferson? What do you think of Thomas Jefferson? You like him? Okay, good. Are we going to take down the statue? Because he was a major slave owner. Now we're going to take down his statue. So you know what? It's fine. You're changing history, you're changing culture, and you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people...
And I'm not talking about the white nationalists or the neo-Nazis, because they should be condemned totally.
...group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also... You had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too.
Unfairly, sir. I'm sorry. I just didn't understand what you were saying. You were saying the press has treated white nationalists unfairly.
No,
I just didn't understand what you were saying.
No. There were people in that.
The press. So I don't understand what you're saying. Are you saying we don't treat white nationalists nice? No, there were people there protesting the taking down of a statue that were not white nationalists.
And I looked the night before. If you look, they were people protesting very quietly the taking down of the statue of Robert E. Lee. I'm sure in that group there were some bad ones. The following day it looked like they had some rough, bad people, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. But you had a lot of people in that group that were there to innocently protest and very legally protest because, you know, I don't know if you know, they had a permit. The other group didn't have a permit. So I only tell you this. There are two sides to a story. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country, a horrible moment. But there are two sides to the country. Does anybody have a final? Does anybody have...
So that's it, guys. Trump wasn't talking about white nationalists when he said there were very fine people on both sides. When Biden started his campaign, and he started it off saying that he started his campaign because he said there were very fine people on both sides, and that he was talking about white nationalists when he said that, it was a complete lie. Trump was not talking about white nationalists when he said that. He was talking about the people from both sides that had come there to peacefully protest the taking down of the statue. When you believe in freedom of speech, even if they are white nationalists, if they're protesting peacefully, you're not supposed to hit them with bats. I know you want to punch a Nazi. I know you want to punch a Nazi. Don't become victim to the media. Watch the entire thing. Go do your research. Find out what you really believe. And also, don't become victim to the crowd. Just because you're out there and tons of people are doing something or acting away, don't be afraid to stand up for what you believe in, even if it's something that goes against what the entire crowd is doing at that moment. Alright, y'all. Like, share, sub the channel. Talk to you guys later. Peace.